Hello everybody. I thought I'd just make another video here just to kind of talk about stuff mostly. I'm not really going to do anything that people haven't seen before. um, this is a picture that I've been working on for several days now in my spare time. It's finished with pencil, the lines are anyway, and you can kind of see, if you zoom in, those are the pencil lines themselves. Very rough, but of course when you go back out, everything smooths up. And I already did the shade, two of these here shade layers, so it's mostly on its way already. But what I wanted to kind of do was just sort of talk about it while I work on it. And I'm going to try to constrain this video to about an hour, since I don't like it when things really tend to go overboard. So I'm going to set my little alarm here. Anyway, I've been wanting to work on stuff like this for a very long time, and after waiting for a long time for some sort of weird opportune moment to spring up and to be able to work on it, I finally realized that I would just have to begin doing it. And that means foregoing video games at night after I'm done with everything I have to do. I can instead then start working on this thing which I want to do. And pictures like this, I know I do adult material for a living, but pictures like this always, right now they're giving me a lot more professional satisfaction. And I've actually started writing this story in this new sort of outer space science fiction universe. And I'm writing it in such a way that it could be a standalone novel without any illustrations. However, I'm pretty sure, just sort of the nature of how I am, I probably will illustrate it. But I'm writing it in my spare time, and I'm having a lot of fun with it because I'm finally comfortable writing in a novel form. I've had several abortive attempts to write a text story before. That was my alarm going off prematurely. I've tried to write text stories before, and it takes some practice, because coming up with ideas is one thing, but coming up with ideas and then writing them in a way that's easy to read and makes a lot of sense and isn't confusing is another skill altogether. And some writers are better at it than others, especially if you're discussing anything remotely complicated. It can get a little tricky. But I've been learning that. I've been studying how other authors do conversations and how they describe things and how they divide chapters and paragraphs and stuff like that. And I've kind of come to realize what I like to both read, and it's a lot different than putting together a comic, I can tell you that much. In a comic, you rely so much on visualization. But in a novel, you don't have any of that at all. But there will be some visuals, because I can't see myself not illustrating some things, like maybe a picture like this per chapter or something. I don't know. I can't say for sure. But anyway, this particular picture here is just an atmosphere picture. It's not really a part of the actual story that I'm doing. It's just kind of taken from the universe to kind of show, here's kind of what happens. Here's some stuff from it. And it's, I've actually started writing in the mornings when my brain is fresh, whereas I used to try to do it at night when I was done with all my work and I was already fatigued. So I'll put in, I'll write like a chapter or the bulk of a chapter in bed in the morning before I start my work. And I found I really kind of like that. I don't think I'm going to stick with this. I think I'm going to go a little bit darker here with this. Let's not have it look like a peach. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Anyway, this is going to kind of be like a very brownish, tannish, monochromatic sort of picture here. But like I said, I had several abortive attempts to try to write stories, and even stories in this universe. Some people who've been following my work might remember that I did some pictures of power-armored bunnies, and I had pictures of little red pandas with these deadly-looking drones and mechs and simulator cockpits and things like that. Well, all of that kind of is from this world that I'm working on. And I tried to write about the bunnies in power armor because, I mean, wouldn't a title like Power Armored Bunnies just be really cool to have? But I ended up, I made a cardinal mistake, at least in my writing, which I've made that mistake before. I made it when I started Hell for Humanity, and I made it, I don't know if anyone remembers that comic, but where I made this mistake where I made this big universe and I made this big story to go along with it, with all this, you know, the conflict and war and politics and things like that, and these big groups maneuvering behind the lines, and then, as if by necessity, I would come up with characters that had to be fit into the roles. And as a result, the way my writing flowed from that was you got the impression that the characters were just kind of very small, and they weren't as personable as I wanted them to be. I may be wrong. I'm probably hypercritical about my own writing, definitely, but after several attempts to start a few stories and then stop dealing with these rabbits as soldiers, I decided to start over and change them. They're actually now, I started writing a story from the standpoint of the characters. And instead of writing them as soldiers where you're kind of just reacting to things that happen to you and you have to just deal with it, I want them to have more control over their destiny. So they are former soldiers or former Marines, and someone's setting off fireworks, getting a little jump on the celebrations. They're former soldiers and Marines, and they are now just kind of freelancing around this universe. Think of kind of like, you know, Han Solo or Firefly or something like that. And the reason why is because you can sort of imagine how the characters would interact together, and people can then get to know the characters and what they're like, and get, you know, and then they'll begin to learn about the universe from the eyes of the characters, seeing things unfold, seeing things begin to happen. And I think that's actually a lot better way to learn about the world, instead of having it just sort of thrown at you like an encyclopedia and then seeing how the characters fit into it. So, but this is the kind of project where it's long term. Like, I'm not writing it super fast. It's not something I'll be done with by probably the end of this year or anything like that. But it's something I'm enjoying, especially while video games just kind of suck right now. Something I'm really enjoying doing in my spare time when I'm done with all my work in the evening. And here we go. But this may be something, I don't know where this is going to go or how it's going to be published or whatnot just yet. I'm thinking of perhaps a published book in print form, as well as perhaps some Patreon support. Since I do pretty well on my website, I don't really have a need for Patreon, so I'm not really going to be using it as far as I know. Unless I have a specific project that I want to pitch as a Patreon project that people can specifically support me for. Maybe something like this, people who want to see more of this, which it's good to kind of get away from all the adult material and actually sort of flex some more diverse sort of illustration chops, I guess. I'm enjoying it anyway, and that's what really matters. So one of my peeves is because I do make my living drawing adult material, is there are people who, therefore, I cannot ever be taken seriously about anything ever. That's just sort of their, it's just where they're at in their thinking, or I don't know, maybe they don't want me to do anything else. They just want me to be sort of irreverent and you know, even though some of my adult material is irreverent, some of it's not. Some of it actually does have it has a little bit of a story, a little bit of a point for people who want to, you know, who want to see it, I guess. I would like to just show that I have other things and other thoughts that go on in my mind. But there's more than just rabbits in this world. There are the ship itself, the main ship, and I'd love to draw it someday. The main ship is crewed by 5 bunnies and then 1 cat. And the cat's very mysterious and a little weird and a little scratchy. And one of the reasons why this world's a little bit different than something like Original Life, where you can just swap out the animal characters with humans. In this world, the different animal characters actually have characteristics that are distinctive to kind of their race. And bunnies act a certain way because they're bunnies, and they have a certain predominant outlook because they're bunnies. And you know, cats act a certain way. Mice tend to have a certain outlook, or at least a propensity or a predilection towards a certain kind of behavior. Now, one of the big themes of the book is that despite this, you know, you can apply, because you are, or not you, but the characters are themselves sentient creatures. We're not bound by whatever our predilections, whatever our biological instincts or inclinations are. We can intellectually decide to be the kinds of people we want to be, and to pursue the kind of life that we want to pursue, regardless of what race we are, what predilection we are, you know, how smart or not very smart we are, based on our species. And I think that's a good take. A while ago, I was inspired to write a story about. This was during the run-up to, I think, during the run-up or the aftermath or whatever to the Iraq War. There was a lot of people saying that Iraqis just were not cut out for freedom because they inevitably vote themselves, you know, a bunch of dictators and idiots for politicians. And then I said, well, how does that bode for us? You know, really looking at it more clearly, we don't elect the brightest people either. But they do vote in theocrats and things like that. They're much more primitive culture, really, when you look at, you know, comparing to cultures that have had enlightenment and those kinds of Western values that we kind of take for granted as living, you know, in everybody around the world. And the fact is with cultures being the way they are, that just isn't true. They just don't. They are oppressed. People are swayed. And you can't, it's kind of hard to do something about it, but I wanted to write a story that kind of went against the idea that certain people were just destined to be slaves or oppressed or live under dictatorships because it's all they deserved, or it's all they knew. Even though it's my views on that war have changed. I remember being for it when it came about, and I no longer think it's a good idea, primarily for the cost in lives alone. I don't think that people who signed up for the service should be forced to fight for other foreign country. I don't think they should nation build. They should just win wars as quickly as possible and come home. And by win wars, I mean, you know, that's not me being a leftist. That's me being a sort of a Sherman-esque total war advocate. You go in there with everything, and I mean anything that wins, and as brutally as possible, and you put a stop to it and come home. And it also just so happens that in this story here, there are the rabbits were used by a nation, an alliance that formed up against a threat. And the rabbits were uplifted from being a more primitive culture. I think that's all the color I'm going to put on him. Just let him kind of be that nice mottled color. Anyway, and they were facing a manpower problem. And so they uplifted the rabbits and proceeded to deploy them as soldiers and workers in factories and things like that, because rabbits breed very quickly. And they would pretty much provide all of that necessary support. And it allowed them to fight until an armistice was signed. And right now the story takes place during that armistice with this threatening power, which did go to war with all the other races that made up this defensive alliance. But the main characters are getting on with their own personal lives, and they're trying to come to grips with, you know, whether they should take sides in this or that, or whether they should take risks, or just kind of try to keep to themselves. You know, I've got the captain, I've got the engineer, I've got the guy who's the muscle, and the cat who's like, no one knows why she's there, and all these other things. Let's see here. One of the problems with these really detailed images is I'll work on them and then I'll have to go back and remember exactly. If I see like a bunch of little lines like in here, I remember like what was that? Do I need to color it differently? What was it? I can't quite tell exactly what it was. So what I'm going to do is, normally when I color, I like to just sort of, if I'm going to put one color, I'm going to put that one color on everything and then go back. But because I'm just kind of coloring this on the fly right now, I'm going to go ahead and do everything on this one character, and then just kind of transfer the color palette onto this one as I need it. Of course, this fur will be a different color, but we'll get onto that later. And my idea for this picture was just kind of like, these guys are on a caravan, and they're just sort of guarding it while they're going to some colony on some frontier planet here. Like I said, these aren't really characters. This is just an illustration from the universe in general. And this gun is just some kind of idea for some sort of futuristic portable rail gun of some kind. And he's got a much smaller, more of a regular assault gun of some kind. Let's see here. I guess we could do a dark cape of some kind here. Here we go. One of the hard parts about working in a science fiction world is coming up with, it's kind of weird when you're writing people that are supposedly hundreds of years more advanced than we are now, stuck on our one planet, and then you come up with some kind of technology that does this or something that does that, and then fucking Google or Apple comes out with something that's even better like 5 years from now, and you're like, God, you know, Jesus, thanks. That's one of the more difficult things about writing science fiction, is just being proven wrong constantly, especially if you're doing like a real Earth timeline. And I remember reading going back and reading the Masamune Shiro Appleseed graphic novels, where he envisions this whole, I mean, a lot of his ignorance about the world really comes out, and about politics in other countries really comes out when you read sort of what he envisioned sort of flowing out of a Third World War. And it's funny seeing how he had this Third World War happening in the 90s, and or at least in a time that's passed since now, that the timeline's already gone. And I think David Gerald even ran into that when he did his War Against the Chittor series, he had this in the aftermath of this Third World War, which was basically everybody against the United States, that occurred in the 90s, the late 90s, and was interrupted by this invasion of alien worms or something. It's a very good series if you can find it. A lot of the books were from like the late 80s, and they're way out of print, I'm sure. You might be able to find digital editions somewhere if you look around. I may go in and do some little modeling around here just to sort of break up the nature of the cape, and just these flat colors here add some more detail. But I really do love working in science fiction more than I do working in fantasy. I even started a fantasy story about in the Cotton Wine universe. But I realized that, whoops, I need to go to another layer here. But I realized that if I released a sort of a novel of the Cotton Wine series, people would be disappointed that it wasn't pornographic, because the Cotton Wine universe is basically that. It's just sort of a, how can I canonize all this weird sex, you know? And I'm not trying to, you know, degrade, well, here I am going to have to qualify everything I say, but I'm not trying to degrade pornography. You can even call it pornography. You can call it adult material if you want to make it more highbrow than it is, eroticism, whatever. But not to degrade it in general for what it is, but most of it is pure shit, and most of it is just appealing to the most basest parts of us, so that even if you do try to do something that has some sort of meaning to it, most people aren't going to give a fuck just because of the nature of it. And anyone who might derive meaning from it may very well just dismiss it because it has, you know, exposed genitals or human sexuality in it, or views on sexuality or whatever. Sad to say, but it's the world we live in. Let me see how this would fold out. And it also goes back to, like I said, there's going to be people who will refuse to take anything seriously if it comes to them in an erotic form. They never will, you know. And I can kind of get that, because if a point can be made without it, why not? You know, why do you need it? And there we go. It's kind of sad, but you know. But I do intend to do a lot more work like this. And it's definitely one of the reasons why I created my my Safe for Work blog on Tumblr. Just so, you know, when you're at the dentist and he's asking what you do, you know, because you have to fill out a form and it asks what you do for a living, and he starts asking questions. Oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an illustrator. Oh, really? How interesting. Where can I see your stuff, you know? Oh, yeah, great, thanks. Meanwhile, he's got the Christian music playing through the radio above head, you know, and you're just like, oh, God. So you have to, you know, having a nice Safe for Work blog you can point people to, where you can show them stuff like this, is beneficial. And the blog doesn't have links to other stuff and things like that, so. I guess I should probably answer some, I guess I can anticipate some questions about this universe. In that it is, I did come up with just sort of a very basic way for them to be traveling faster than light. I thought about just some sort of, you know, some made up bullshit faster than light, because all faster than light right now is just bullshit. You know, all the warping from Star Trek and all the crap, the wormholes and the jump gates and all that is just pure utter theoretical nonsense right now. But I went ahead and did it so I could have multiple systems and a little more of a universe to play with, I guess. I had originally thought of this story as taking place on a gas giant that had a bunch of moons, which would require it to be really close to the sun. Even though there are what they call hot Jupiters, they generally aren't within what they call the Goldilocks zone, where life is habitable, and even in such a big orbit for a moon might not be conducive to the kinds of life that we're familiar with. So, and it was fraught with a lot of scientific complications that, you know, I probably wouldn't want to spend too much time just sort of studying forever and ever. So I went away with that and just thought that, you know, going faster than light would just be easier. But it was kind of neat because you would have all these different moons that would be habitable around this gas giant, like this big Jupiter. And so imagine using 1960s moonshot technology to literally visit other worlds with other life forms and other beings on it. And that kind of captured my imagination a lot. But every time I talked to someone who kind of knew what they were talking about scientifically, about the idea, they kind of were like, I don't know how possible that would be, you know. So I eventually kind of abandoned it and went with something more traditional. Because I mean, I think it would be kind of neat for alien species with still, you know, making cathode ray tubes and stuff like that to be encountering each other and having to deal with each other and having this entire sort of stellar community cropping up based on just sort of standard industrial technology. I think would be really neat, and just the discovery of each other through, you know, looking at each other and speculating on each other through even, you know, like Renaissance era telescopes and things like that. I think it opens up a lot of neat storytelling and developmental possibilities. Okay. Like I said, this is just going to be a big study in sort of this sandy color here. But yeah, I'm starting to talk about this project because it's something that I don't want to give away a lot of details on it. I'm not going to tell you, oh, here's what the story's about, and here's whatever, blah, blah, blah. And to all the simple-minded people who hate thinking, no, it's not going to be full of just like my, you know, it's not about political stuff being, you know, hammered home like with a hammer. It's just, it's these characters, and it's like all these different situations that they're in. In fact, you know, there's not going to be sort of a utopia necessarily because I don't believe in them. And if the universe around us is as imperfect as the world that we live in politically. So, you know, I will say that using animals has really given you a lot of sort of, you can easily tell how something is going to be. One of the things I didn't do is I didn't, I didn't cast felines as sort of these weird Klingon people. Like, I've always hated Klingon races. I've hated the Klingons in Star Trek. I've always hated everything that has to be a warrior race in a universe. Like, we just have to have them. You know, I hated the Narn in Babylon 5. I hated the whatever the hell that dude with the squid face was on Farscape. I hated him with a passion. You know, I used to hate the Reavers from Firefly, but then when we found out where they actually came from, they made a little more sense, and I kind of liked them, even though they're not, they're not like Klingons. They don't have a culture. They're just uncontrollably violent. So how they fly spaceships, I don't know. But anyway, I don't think that dedicated warrior societies like Klingons could actually maintain the technology levels that they do, because so much more is required to run these systems. And I know there was one story someone wrote where the Klingons actually have this pretty complex ordinary society. The warriors just sort of live on the outer shell of the society. They're the ones in the spaceships, so they're the ones that everyone else knows about. And it's kind of this aggressive face on an otherwise more multifaceted, more believable culture. And a lot of the smarter Klingons, they just say things like, you don't think we're all that stupid. You don't think we're all running around, getting into fights. Surest way to die before you're 30. No, they let the warriors do all that stupid crap while they stay behind and do research and study things and build things and run economies and things like that. So, but using animal races, you can immediately fall into these different cultures. Like the cats aren't like the cats from Wing Commander, which I don't know why, or the Man Zen Wars, where I don't know why they think that would make a good cat, because no cat I've ever owned has been, they've never really been these kinds of crazy, just these weird, bloodthirsty, thoughtless pieces of crap. I think that probably the felines from the Elder Scrolls universe, the Khajiit, may be the most cat-like of the cat races from science fiction or fantasy. They kind of seem to have an attitude. It's that sort of that independent, somewhat super independent nature that most cat owners would recognize in their cats. Kind of that, they're not antisocial. They like being, petted and picked up sometimes and things like that. But they can either take it or leave it. They will or they won't. That's just kind of the way a cat is. It's not like a dog that sort of watches you, and every time you get up out of your chair, he runs after you, to see what you're going to do, or he's some kind of, as Robert De Niro said, an emotionally shallow animal. But the cats in this universe are they kind of have these scattered societies. There's no one government you can talk to. And it's another thing I'm doing with the homeworlds is there are multiple governments, just like if Earth were to go into space, it would probably be a handful of nations, sovereign nations, or some kind of weird coalition between those nations to go into space. It wouldn't be just Earth as a single government going into space. And the felines themselves barely have anything resembling a government. They're so independent. They practically teeter on the edge of anarchy all the time. And so there are these felines who go to other societies and just live and don't give a crap. And then there are also felines that are pirates and criminals and mercenaries who they operate in these groups that do have hierarchies, but like cats in real life do. But their overall natures are very independent and chafing. And a lot of them believe that in order to get ahead, they have to dominate other people and sort of have a dog-eat-dog or dog-eat-dog world, even though it isn't really true. They don't have to do that. And the bunnies are very communal, and it's interesting sort of pondering the history of races that don't have a history of being predatory, of catching animals and eating them. You can imagine an entirely 100% vegetarian society you know, and you end up with these totally different developmental scenarios, which affects everything from sort of the nature of their settlements to their family life and things like that. And I have a race of mice that's completely and totally motivated by almost a paranoid fear of everything, you know, just like a mouse would. And so their defensive technologies and defensive policies have colored everything in their culture and in their history. Propelling them, the only reason they propelled into space is to push their defenses out even further, because the universe is teeming with deadly things that, of course, want to kill them right around the corner any minute now. You know, see where the end of that boot is. Yeah. Okay. And I think the one race that's probably the most human-like, the most like us, would be foxes. They're kind of like a cross between a dog and a cat. They have, you know, I kind of set up their culture kind of like, sort of like a cross between modern politics and France in the 1800s, where they just sort of, you know, have one revolution after another. You know, they keep changing governments and things like that. So here we go. I'm probably, because I want to keep this video under an hour, there's no way I'm going to finish this picture. I probably won't even finish it tonight. It'll probably take several more days of work, and my spare time work at least, to do. And I'll probably just be doing flats tonight. I may not even finish the flats tonight, but I might. I don't know. I definitely won't finish them within an hour. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add some another variation pattern to this uniform here. I'm trying to make these guys look like, I tried to not make them look military. I tried to make them look like they were, you know, just some kind of rabbit militia on a frontier where there may not be a military presence. They're just there. So I kind of give them these non-standard uniforms, non-standard weapons. Just sort of, they're not wearing helmets or armor. They have goggles and, you know, elbow pads and jazz like that. I also broke my normal style, trying to kind of, one of the things I wanted to do was not get away from my cartoony style, because I like it and, you know, other people like it, but just to draw different, just have something different, to say I can do it this way if I want to. And one of the things I wanted to do was to be able to just pretend I was drawing it from scratch. I wouldn't remember any of my old habits, and when I drew heads for these kinds of characters, and so I would end up with a more, you want to use the term, feral-looking rabbit head, as opposed to sort of a round, very anthropomorphized human-looking rabbit head. To end up with something like this, and I kind of like it. And so when I design the other races, which I haven't really done yet, they too will be more feralized, I guess is one way to say it. I think that's going to be a different color, so. And I really liked it because, you know, you end up consciously thinking about how you're going to draw this and how you're going to draw that, instead of like when I'm drawing my webcomic or something like that, it's all very it's all just, a lot of it is just from muscle memory, and it's very quick because like things like Original Life are the only things that it's the only thing I have that where I have a really hard schedule. You know, I have to do 2 pages a week, and if I don't, I have to the next week I have to make up for it. I have to do even more. You know, so it's the only thing that has a hard schedule. So it's the only thing. I remember one person was criticizing me because he would look at my webcomic from year to year. He was looking at Original Life primarily, saying that, wow, as long as you've been drawing, you know, this is as good as you've gotten, you know, with the webcomic, as if he expects me to pour by 100% the fullness of my skill and everything I've learned over the years into the Original Life webpage, which is, you know, which is about the stories of the lives of these characters. It's not an expose on how my skill has improved. You know, I don't, you know, if he saw what I was drawing 5 years ago and then could see this particular picture I'm working on now, you know, he might not be saying something like that. He might be a little bit different. So this picture I kind of wanted to do kind of like maybe like a theoretical novel cover, you know, where you'd have text up at top, and I'll be painting all kinds of clouds and atmosphere here, and the clouds will be predominantly brown too, so it'll be a new experience working on something other than a blue sky. Let me see here. Let's do some gloves. But usually I'm very fatigued at the end of the day when I've finished all the work I have to do, so that I can do what I want to. And sometimes when I'm like, oh, well, let me do this or do that, and I feel very tired, and it's kind of like, it's not quite the way I want to. My brain's a little tired or whatever. But when I've been really inspired to do this lately for the past couple months. And so as tired as I've been, I've always made time for it. I've always enjoyed it. And so I've always avoided cutting corners or making it really sketchy, and that's kind of how I want to proceed with this. I had a collaboration originally with this rough idea in mind with another artist named Bonk. Now, a lot of you may know him. He's a good friend of mine, and we got all inspired about it driving home one year from, I think it was some convention. I forget which one. It might have been Anthrocon last year, actually. Anyway, and you know, he was all inspired and jazzed up for it, and you know, when we're talking about it. But of course, getting back to your life with all the bills you have to pay and all the commissions you have to do and all the projects you have to keep up with in order to, you know, be able to pay the rent and buy food, it all gets, you know, his time to illustrate it gets thrown aside, and it's a shame because he is a professional grade illustrator when he's drawing something that requires it. And he's really good. And if you've seen any of the drawings he's done, some of the drawings he's done that have been about technology and a lot of space stuff, and which I know he really loves to do, you'll see how good his stuff has been in that respect. Go ahead and just color that in. This is kind of like some kind of little armored vest that he's wearing or something, I think. So I know that his illustrations would be way better for it than mine, just because his skill and his schooling and everything like that. But I don't like relying on others, and I'm not going to foist this on him as an expectation. So it's a good excuse for me to, you know, stop fucking around with, you know, getting by on what I can do easily, and to challenge myself to begin doing stuff that I need to learn to do and to be comfortable with doing, and stuff that I want to be known for as well. And speaking of Patreon, I've thought I have a Patreon account that I use to support others, but because my site does well enough, I don't really need to rely on it for money. I make a living off my site, a pretty decent one. But a project like this, if it becomes a thing that people want, if it becomes something that people want to help accelerate, I may, as I get enough material together, begin making it a Patreon project. And it may go some way of replacing some of the commissions that I have to do. Not really have to, but do for extra bread on the side. And it'd be interesting to see how well this particular universe, this story idea, could do on its own, just by supporters on the internet. I'd be really interested in that. But that's a ways off. Like I said, I don't want to use Patreon until I have a good project already kind of ready to go and come up with a model for making the money. Like here's how the pricing would work, here's what you would get for this, and here's the update schedule and all that. So and I'm kind of cringing thinking about all the people who might see this and go into it and go, well, where are the boobs? You know, where's the... And I have to go, well, that's not what this is. Sorry, you know. And they kind of go, oh, I got to read stuff. Oh no, you know, I don't like that. So, a weird ad hoc. Kind of a weird ad hoc camouflage scheme there on that guy, but that's okay. Kind of reminds me of painting old Imperial Guard figures for Warhammer 40k. You just come up with a simple scheme you can apply to like 10 people in a day. Even though 40k is just, ugh, God. When I look at a lot of 40k and I look at the universe it's in, it's like the kind of world a really angsty 15-year-old would come up with. You know, everything's hopeless, everything's evil, everything's perpetual conflict. There is no escape. You know, and everyone wants to be a space marine, even though they're supposed to be really rare. Everyone's got an army for them. You know. And when I was into it, the rules were, you know, they'd come out with an edition, and here's the base rules for the base edition. Oh, that looks great. And then everyone has to follow the rules until your codex comes out, and then here's how you get to break the rules without really a good, adequate explanation. And I think second edition was the best edition they ever did. You could actually use combat tactics like real soldiers and you know, covering fire and crap like that, and they got rid of all of it in order to make it a big Blood Bowl tournament. You know, you're in the future and you have all these guns and laser weapons and shit like that, and what are you doing? Picking up a sword and charging? So what are you, out of your fucking mind? Anyway, it was crap. I remember the Eldar were one of the most effective shooting armies in the whole game, and it kind of threw people for a loop because they didn't expect it to be that way. They weren't written that way. But their main rifle had a 24-inch range and had a automatic fire dice applied to it, and had a armor save modifier of -2, which means it could cut through Space Marines very easily. And they neutered them. They cut the range down in half and took away armor modifiers. So it's like they forced the game's dying race to become an assault army, which is stupid. If you're a dying race, why would you grab a sword and charge a big mob of orcs? That's just dumb. You would, you know, if you're a dying race, you dig in. You have the best defenses in the world because you need them. You have, you would get into a trench and you machine gun anyone who tries to get close to you. That's what you do when you're a dying race. You know. Okay. Let's see here. trying to figure out what color to make that gun. I don't want to make it like Mass Effect, where the guns are like, they're colored like toys or something. Let's do these kind of paint chips. See here, well, I've got about 5 minutes in, so this is where I'm going to leave off the video for now. And just get that filled in a little bit there. And I wanted to kind of just, talk about what I was doing and the things I had planned. And this picture will be finished in some days. It's just what I'm working on in the evenings now. And we'll talk to you guys